Hey everybody, this is Michelle. And this is her sidekick, Julie. And we're coming to you from the Emerald City you all know by now as Seattle, Washington, right?
The 206.
The 206, baby.
Or the 425.
No, it's the 206.
Okay.
The original.
Yeah, I know.
The original 206. Well, we have an episode here today we're really excited about because we are going to talk about addiction. And this is a topic that I think has come up for a lot of different people in family members and things like that. So we have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Rachel, and she is going to share her story with us. We feel really honored to have her here. Some of it might be kind of tough to tell, but we're just going to give her the opportunity to share it. And as she has said, you know, the hope is that what her story is and her sharing her story will really resonate with other people and perhaps help other people even with their own addiction. So with that in mind, I would love to introduce Rachel to you. Hi, Rachel.
Thank you, blonde and brunette.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I really feel honored. And my name is Rachel. I'm a grateful recovering addict. Today I have 4.5 years clean. I'm 53 years old, born and raised in Seattle. My addiction started when I was super young. The first time I got high, I was 4 years old, about
Wow.
4 years old with my stepdad, and he was smoking out of a bong and he would have me suck up the residue. And I remember getting that feeling, cocaine, and my mom was at work. She worked at the Seattle Times. And so I was the life of the party. Like he had a bunch of men there smoking weed and doing lines and drinking. And
He was babysitting you?
yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. And so
You were 4.
Okay.
and so that's when it started. I remember running away from him in my nightgown. And this was I was 5 years old. I ran away from him in my nightgown and I went down to the canal and the police picked me up and I led them to my grandma's house.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't a safe guy. I thought he was my dad for 11 years, but turned out he wasn't my real dad, but I'll get to that later. I just remember being really lonely. I'm an only child. And I remember watching my mom. She's an alcoholic as well. She's one of us or one of me.
When you say that, you mean
An addict.
An addict.
Yeah.
Yes. And
But did she know she was an addict at the time? I mean,
not
back
at
in the day,
no,
they didn't really
it
talk
was
about that.
hippie, you know,
Okay.
peace, love. They started this business, Pillow Power. They made furniture and pillows and had this big store in Greenwood. And we became really rich really fast. On top of that, he was dealing cocaine and we were going back and forth to Hawaii. And I just remember being alone a lot. Then they separated. And my mom kept drinking and we moved to Green Lake. That's when there was so many pedophiles in our neighborhood and I was so young and vulnerable and I was going through puberty at a super young age. My boobs were getting bigger and bigger started at age 7, 8, 9.
Yeah. You looked older than you really were.
Yes. And I remember being preyed on because my mom was working nights as a janitor and I was home alone every day after school. And so that's when abuse started. I remember always stealing, going in my mom's weed drawer, stealing joints, rolling joints at 7, 8, 9, going up to my grade school, getting my best friend out of school and skipping school at that age,
Wow.
and
at 7.
at 7.
I know I keep reconfirming these ages, but
At 7, 8, 9, I remember staying home to smoke weed, making out with boys, having them over, at 8 and 9.
Were they older or?
Just maybe 1 year older,
Okay.
but they were wild too. And I also had a babysitter that was older and I wanted to be her. And she was super fancy and, very promiscuous. I would watch her have sex when I was 11 years old and she allowed me to, it was really, it was weird.
So she's the one that was watching you when your mom was working.
it's okay to say it was really fucked up.
Yeah.
I knew you wanted.
You can actually say whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. She would watch me on the weekends.
Okay.
But no, I was home alone
At
on the
night.
week. Yeah. And I never had rules. I never had homework. I would come home after school, go down to 7-Eleven, get their hot dog, corn dogs. That's what I'd eat for dinner. And I would play Donkey Kong and I got really good at it. And then all the wild kids would be there too,
At your house?
No, at the 7-Eleven.
Oh, at the 7-Eleven. Okay.
And nobody would come to my house because my mom would always, when she drank, she would take her shirt off or make out with one of the boys or, do something really weird, And so nobody was allowed. The friends that I had that were good friends, they weren't allowed to come to my house and stay the night.
Yeah.
I was the crazy house. My mom was crazy.
Were you going over to their houses?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And I always wanted a family and I always wanted a sibling. I always wished that I, had rules and that didn't know. I always wanted to be like the student athlete. Mm-hmm. But then I could never make it because I was in the alley smoking weed and making out with boys. And
isn't it funny you're talking about, I wish I had rules. And it's like, I can think of my children myself. My parents were super strict going, you have too damn many rules. And it's like, you're just craving rules as a kid.
I wanted stability. I wanted routine. And so a big event that happened when I was 11, my mom was drunk and it was 12 at night and she was calling somebody on the phone crying, saying, this is your daughter, and I grabbed the phone and I said, I'm sorry, my mom's really drunk right now. I don't know what she's talking about. And he said, is this Rachel? And I said, yes, this is Rachel. And he said, I think you're my daughter. And I was like, what? And so then his wife got on the phone and she told me the story. My mom met this guy and she said that I thought that Bill Oliver, the cocaine dealer, the guy that was feeding me drugs, Rachel loves him and thinks that's her dad. So I want you to sign a
giving up any
parental rights. And so he was a heroin addict and he was clean at the time, but he struggled in and out of heroin, and so he signed those papers. And so at 11 years old, he got a lawyer. And he wanted to see me and meet me and get to know me. And so the first time I met him, I was 11 years old. And
it's okay.
And I remember not having clean clothes and my mom wasn't there. I was by myself at my house and not having any clean clothes. And I was trying on all these dresses and I was a tomboy. I rode a BMX bike. I was crazy. I was a daredevil. I mean, I was not a girly girl, So I wore a dress. And he had a layover in Seattle. He was going to Hawaii. He showed up at my front door and he did this funny thing with this thumb, like double jointed. And he said, can you do this? And I said, I don't know, but I'll try. And so I did it. And he said, you're my daughter. And we had the same thumbs and it was so scary. And I felt so alone in that moment. And I felt that was one of the first times I felt like this huge amount of shame. I felt dirty and I'd been molested at this time already and by neighbors. And so I was this scared little girl meeting my dad for the first time and he was so together. He was a barber and he lived in the Tri-Cities and his wife was really beautiful. He was clean at the time. And so they were on their way to Hawaii and he did say, do you feel comfortable in that dress? And I started crying and I said, no. And he said, go change into something comfortable. And I didn't have, I didn't have any clean clothes. So he went and got me some clothes. And I remember he got me these overalls and we went out for pizza and I was so excited to meet my dad for the first time. And then they got into this big court, whatever. She wanted back child. My mom was an alcoholic and crazy at the time. And
how did she feel about you wanting to meet your dad? Was she cool with that?
She was for that. And she was tired being a single mom and she was an alcoholic at the time. And shortly after that, she quit drinking. She quit drinking when I was 11. Then I started to see my dad go see him in Richland, maybe a couple times. And then I started high school. I was failing every grade. I was walking in the front door, leaving the back door, going to the alley, going to the donut shop, smoking weed. But I have to say this first. I lost my virginity at 11 years old. That's freaking crazy.
Yeah. Were you already having your period at 11?
Oh, yeah. I started my period when I was 9.
Okay.
In white James jeans pants.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
And it was horrific.
What do I do?
I'm like, this is crazy. Yeah. And then I went to junior high and junior high was when I really started drinking a lot. I remember blacking out at a Breakers game and throwing up and having alcohol poisoning. And my mom thought I was going to die. And that's the first time I swore I would never drink again. And the next weekend I was drinking. And then I went to high school and then I, was being slipped through the cracks and not going to school. And my dad was keeping an eye on my attendance. And he said, you're failing all your grades and I want you to come live with me. How do you feel about that? And I was like, yeah, maybe I can have a chance to be that athlete and academic girl that I've wanted to be. There was preppy. I just didn't know who I wanted to be. I was always just this kind of awkward.
Didn't know where you fit.
never felt comfortable in my skin. Ever. I always wanted something to change the way I felt, whether it was masturbation, whether it was promiscuous with all the boys. I was just so lost and just so lonely and scared. And I hid it really well because drugs and alcohol worked for me for a long time. In a sense, it really helped me get through all that trauma and get through all that.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right. I was self-medicating,
Yes.
something, because what do you do with all that? And so I went and lived with my dad when I was 16 years old, and I did. I got a 3.5
Yep.
and I was doing really good. I wasn't having sex. I had rules. I had to clean my room before I went out on Saturdays, and I had chores, and I had everything that I wanted,
Did you enjoy all that structure?
I loved it.
You were craving it.
I was and I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing drugs, but I was super homesick. And then one day my dad, he didn't come home all night.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And he was still married at that time?
Yeah. He was married to Chris, which she was a normie, and we lived in a really nice house, and my dad had a business. You would never know what was going on behind closed doors.
And I just want to clear normie, meaning not addicted.
Addict.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just
Oh,
being,
is that what
for our
I was-
listeners. Yeah.
That's true. My stepmom was a normie, so she was more of a codependent and she needed Al-Anon, which is for codependency, you know.
Right.
And so they hid a lot of things from me. But one night he didn't come home, and he came home in the morning with one of his friends, and he made me a sandwich for lunch, and he put like 20 toothpicks in this meatloaf sandwich. Like, he was so high, and he was a heroin addict. I was so mad at him. I went to school and went directly into the counselor's office and said, my dad relapsed. He's on heroin, and I want to go home. I wanted to go home, and I wanted to drink, and I wanted to see all my friends, and I wanted to escape that feeling, you know?
Oh gosh, girl.
My mom and my stepdad were there within 5 hours. I packed up my whole room and I left. That was probably in October. August, I get a phone call from my dad's pastor, and he said, Rachel, your dad, he's not going to make it. You need to get here to say goodbye. I just denied it. I threw the phone and I started crying for a minute, and then I got it together. It was Torchlight Parade.
Oh.
You know, my girlfriends were there. We were getting ready. My friends were like, we don't have to go if you don't want to go. And I was like, no, let's go, you know, and I just stuffed it as deep as it could go. And I went out and got really wasted, had a one night stand with some guy I didn't even know. And people were like whispering, Rachel's dad's going to die.
Well, did he OD or something?
No, he had cirrhosis of the liver and hepatitis A, all the above. He was shutting down. The next day I got the phone call that he didn't make it.
Wow.
But I did call him after I got off the phone with my pastor. I did call him in the hospital, and I said, Dad, I'm so sorry I left the way I did say I was sorry I left the way I did. And he said, thanks for talking to us about it. And that was that. And
Like, did he say that like in a sincere way, or was he being sarcastic?
He was upset with me.
Oh, okay.
You know, like I hurt him really bad. Right. That was the last time I ever talked to my dad. And after that, then it went deep. Then it was on.
And you were how old?
I was 16.
16. Okay.
Yeah. And so then I transferred to a alternative high school. I had a boyfriend that I was really in love with. I got pregnant and I got an abortion, you know, and I wanted that baby, you know. And then I just was smoking weed and drinking, and I managed to could never be faithful. I was always really promiscuous, and I used my body and my looks to manipulate and to get everything that I wanted. And I had to seek attention, and I had to know that everybody wanted me, or
validation.
Like, do you see me now? Do you see me now? And, you know, and then I broke up with that boyfriend, and then I met my first son, Guy. His name's Guy, and I met his dad.
Okay.
And he was older than I was, and he could buy me alcohol, and he had just gotten a divorce. He had 2 kids, and I wanted to save him. Then we started dating, and so I was a stepmom to the 2 kids, and I had this fantasy that I wanted to be pregnant and, you know, get married and have a family and be normal. Turns out he was a cocaine addict. I ended up getting pregnant, and he would leave for weeks at a time. and it was very toxic, and he never put his hands on me, but he was crazy.
How old were you?
I was 20.
You were 20. Okay.
When I got pregnant.
Okay.
I'm kind of jumping around.
No, that's
I've
okay.
never
I'm good.
actually told my story, but
Yeah. That's
I mean,
okay.
I've shared my experience, strength, and hope in meetings a lot, but
Yeah.
never my full story.
Yeah.
So I was 20 when I got pregnant with my first son in this relationship that was just crazy, you know. And then I had my son. I was able to quit drinking, and I did smoke some weed when I was pregnant with him. I quit smoking cigarettes. I really wanted this baby so bad because I thought it was that moment of, you know, maybe this is going to save me, you know, which it did in a lot of ways. It really did. It gave me purpose, and it did slow me down. I really believe that I was born to be a mom. I mean, I was born to love. And so I had this cute little baby, and he was born when I was 21, and I was working on Queen Anne as a florist, and I wasn't really making that much money. And so I was like, I want to make some quick money. So then I went into Deja Vu, and I was like, I'd like to experience being a stripper, you know? And so I started doing that, and I worked during the day, and I had a lot of regulars. I was making really good money, and it was more like counseling, you know, like sitting down with the customer and just talking about their fantasies. And it was actually really fun at first. Then Guy's dad, he was providing me with cocaine. At first I was selling it, but then I started doing a line here, line there. And then I was like, oh my God, why haven't I found this before this? You know, it was like, it made me feel so good. And
So that was the first time you
Had cocaine.
tried cocaine.
Yeah. I was 21 years old, and I was like, oh, this is just the best feeling. I felt invincible. I felt beautiful. I felt I had arrived. So then I started to do a lot of cocaine, and at this time my mom was clean, and so she would watch Guy a lot. And then I met my husband that I'm married to now. I met him while I was stripping, and he would watch Guy while I would go to work. And I'd actually met my husband when I was 16, and we had sex when I was 16. The first time we had sex, I had cornrows in my hair, and I was 16 years old, and he had this big party in Inverness, and I was really smitten on this, but he was my first love's best friend. So it wasn't, we got to put this down. We can't run with this, you know? And so then I met him when I was 20, or then we, you know, reunited when I was 21, and just head over heels with him. And he was watching my son Guy, and he was dealing cocaine at the time. We just started doing a mass amounts of cocaine. We moved to Queen Anne, and coming down off of cocaine is no joke. I felt that despair, and I felt like
your highs are really high and your lows are really low.
So when I would come down, I would cry and just be a freaking shit show, you know. The first time I went to treatment, I was 21. I went to Sundown M Ranch, and I went there for cocaine.
Okay.
If I can just get off of cocaine, I'll be good. I came home. I wasn't really willing to do meetings or the aftercare suggestions. 2 weeks later, I was doing lines. My husband, he was a bartender, so it was the nightlife. It was after our parties all the time, and I never could hold a job. You know, I was just a shit show, and I wanted to get loaded all the time.
How was that going with a child?
I was somehow maintaining.
Was your mom like in the picture?
Yeah, she was watching him a lot, but I was kind of maintaining somehow, some way. I would pull it together. I was doing cocaine in the bathroom when my son was sleeping, you know?
Right.
I didn't leave him alone, but I would drink and do drugs while he was asleep, or even when he was up, I would go into the bathroom and do cocaine. Then that just kind of went on. Then I got evicted, and my husband was working out of town, and I moved in with my in-laws, and I moved into their mother-in-law place. And that's when I was introduced to, you know, what I call my higher power, God. And I got onto some antidepressants, and I was really trying to stay clean, get my shit together. And so I was in and out of that. Stay clean for 2 weeks, stay clean for 3 months. It was a battle. Then when I was getting heavy into cocaine, one of my friends came over and left a line of methamphetamines, and I did a line of methamphetamines, and I was like, why haven't I ever found
Discovered
this?
that,
yeah. Why would I do cocaine ever again? You know? And so then it became this meth quest. Could get things done and be present with, as present as you can with your kids. And you didn't have to do it as much. It was kind of like this sneaky little affair, you know, like nobody knew. And I kind of could hold it together a little bit more. The come down wasn't as bad, or I didn't even really come down most of the time. I just kept going.
Kept going.
Yeah.
Did your husband know you're doing that?
Yeah, we started doing it together.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
quick question? So you said you moved to Inverness with his parents. Were they a good influence?
Yes.
Because that's when you found God you were talking about?
Yes. His mom, I call her my angel, you know, she still is to this day. And they never did drugs or they were normies. They're really good people. But they have their own dysfunctional way. I mean, every family is fucked up in their own way.
Yep.
You know, we all have our demons. We all have our struggles, whether it's food, gambling, sex addiction, bulimia. I mean, we all have our
coping.
Yeah. It wasn't like the perfect little family, but it was definitely better than what I came from. You know, my mom did the best she could do with what she was doing. And I forgive my mom today, but it was a struggle.
I was going to say, that probably took you a while.
Yeah, it was a struggle. I was in and out of meth addiction and...
You were expecting child number 2?
Yeah. So I got my shit together for a little bit.
Yeah.
While I had Matthew. And then after he was born, then I started dabbling again. And then we moved out to Stanwood. I had Matthew. And then I got pregnant right away after Matthew. So my husband's family were like, are you guys going to get married? Or you're having all these babies and you're, you know, this is crazy. And so I was like, babe, how does March 26th sound? And he was like, yeah, sure. Let's get married 26th March. That's cool. I was pregnant with my third child. After I had Matthew, I got pregnant with Noah, got married. And then I tried to get my shit together in Stanwood. We had this cute little house and my husband, he's a builder.
How old are you at this point?
30.
Okay.
Matthew was born in 98 and Noah was born in 99.
Oh, wow.
They are 13 months apart. Yeah. And so I have Guy and Matthew and Noah, both in diapers. My husband's gone all the time. And I started doing meth all the time. My friends would come over and we would just clean and do projects and do crafts. And while the babies were sleeping, we were in the garage doing meth. And at this point, I wasn't smoking it yet. I was just, while I was there, I smoked it for the first time. And then it got bad. And then...
How did you get exposed to the smoking part? Did one of your friends?
One of my friends was smoking it. And so I tried it and I never went back to doing it any other way. And this was actually 1999. My husband and I got into this huge fight and I climbed out the window. I was crazy. Fight my husband. I was very belligerent. So I climbed out the window after we got into this fight and I left. I went to the grocery store and got some groceries and alcohol, wrote a bad check. And then I went into the bar afterwards and I got a electric iced tea. On my way home, I rear-ended this car on Highway 99. I was going over 50 miles an hour and I almost bit my tongue off. I had a head injury. And so I tried to get my shit together, but I just couldn't. I couldn't pull myself together. And so I kept using, and then we got evicted from that house and we moved back to Inverness. And then I went to treatment in Arizona. It seemed like I was always trying to get my shit together. I wasn't able to really hide it that much. I always wanted to be better. You know, I always wanted to be that dream mom, wherever that dream came from. I spent a lot of time at my grandma's house. I forgot to mention that. That's a big one.
Well, you went there when you were 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like she was my hero. My grandma was my favorite human in the whole world. And she was that normal. She was a cook at the Sale Public Schools and she didn't drink. She didn't do drugs. I could always go there. And she was just my favorite person ever. I remember as a kid when I was with my mom, I remember crying myself to sleep. I mean, probably every night. I want my grandma. I want my grandma. You know, I just wanted my grandma all the time.
She gave you the stability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my grandma and my grandpa paid for my first treatment center when I went to Sundown M Ranch. And then I didn't make it. Moving forward, I was back at my in-laws in Inverness. I wanted to go to treatment again. I wanted help. And so I went to Arizona inpatient. I really wanted it. Felt like I gave it my all. They suggested to stay in clean and sober housing and stay. And I wanted to go home. I wasn't willing to do whatever it took. I was in a hurry to get home. I went home. I maybe stayed clean 4 months after that. When you stay clean for a little bit, it's, you know, when you relapse, it takes a little bit of time to get off the hook. You can kind of hide it a little bit.
Is there something that triggers that? Is it like stress that you remember triggering that? I mean, after 4 months?
My husband was loaded.
Okay.
I was with him and we were at one of their friends' house and I had just gotten home from church and it just happened. And I still wasn't comfortable in my skin because I wasn't really doing meetings. I wasn't doing any step work. I wasn't doing the work to get that freedom and healing from the root of all of, because it started the abuse, the trauma, the mom being an alcoholic, the dad. I mean, all of those events were traumatic to me. And so I wasn't willing to dig into the healing process. So I would always relapse.
It sounds like another thing would happen and then you'd be in a good place. Another thing would happen and test you and you'd take a step back.
Or not dealing with that trauma, a certain smell or a certain noise or a certain song or there's just all these triggers that would just be like, not today. I can't do this. I can't be in my skin. I can't do it. I always had to have alcohol in the mix. I always did with speed because I needed that. It's kind of like a speedball. I needed that up. I needed that down. And I was always trying to find this concoction that maybe 10 times out of the years that I used, 10 of those times I was like, this is the concoction. Like, this is it. There was always like this trying to figure out the
ratios.
Yes. Yes. And when it's street drugs, you don't know what's in that methamphetamines, I relapsed and then, so I went on for a while and then my in-laws said to my husband, if you don't get treatment, we're going to take custody of your children.
Is that to your husband about you?
My mother-in-law and father-in-law said this to my husband. Okay. If you don't get clean, if you don't go to treatment, we're going to take the kids.
Because you were both using.
Yes. They had seen me attempt to get clean several times, but they'd never seen my husband in all this time. And so he said, yes, I'll do it. He went to the same treatment center in Arizona and I was like 30 days of treatment. He's not going to do it, and I was like, screw this. And so I went on a bender and this was the first time I had left my kids for days at a time. I was gone for 42 days. I was couch surfing. I cheated on my husband. I did all the things I said I would never do. And I was just so full of shame and guilt. I hated myself. I like met this man and I traded this battered woman to him and his family. And I went to Whidbey Island and I met his whole family. I was a master manipulator, that was a survival thing for me. And I convinced this family that I was a battered woman with these kids and I was trying to get clean and I was waiting for treatment and they just accepted me in and it was this big facade. And this guy didn't want me to do meth. And so I was coming down off of meth when I'm Whidbey Island with this really rich family. It was crazy. Like I couldn't believe where I was and what was going on. And this man was a late stage alcoholic. He was crazy in itself. He didn't want me to do drugs while I was there. And so I was coming down and by the third day, I was just a wreck. On our way home, I looked at him and I was like, ew, gross. I want to go home. Drop me off at my friend's house. And so he dropped me off at my friend's house in Greenwood. And my husband had done the treatment. He had gotten home. And my husband actually called this family when I was in Whidbey Island and found me there. And he told the guy that I was with, his mom, she's an addict and she's lying. He blew my cover. You know? And so it kind of blew up in my face and then I all of a sudden wanted to go home and I wanted to get clean and I missed my kids and it was like day 42. I hadn't talked to my kids. I'd missed my oldest son's birthday. First time ever. What a horrible mother. What a piece of shit. When I got into town, I called my husband with my mother-in-law and I was willing to do whatever it took at this moment. And so I went to this free treatment center on Cherry Street. It was like a cult. Like they locked me in this door and they were speaking in tongues and it was like, it was crazy. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here.
And it was a treatment center?
It was like a free treatment center, and I was like, I have to get out of here. I'll do whatever it takes. But my mother-in-law and my husband were like, if you use, you can't come home. They weren't even going to let me come home, but I begged them to come home. I'll do whatever it takes, So they let me come home. I was on tightrope. I was going to meetings every day. I got a sponsor. I went to this women's retreat, which changed my life. And then I did outpatient and I started to do the deal. I started to get 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 30 days, 3 months, 6 months. And I started to get this recovery thing. This was in 2002. And my husband was clean too. And so we were both clean, starting to live our best life, playing clean and sober softball, going to meetings, living the clean life, having our boys. And I was working the steps and I had a couple sponsees and it was like my life, recovery was my life. And I started to get some healing from my trauma and I started to get some freedom. Like real freedom. Like I felt comfortable in my skin for once in ever.
And you weren't looking for your next, next fix, your next drink or anything.
So I got a year birthday, I got a 2-year birthday, I got a 3-year birthday. And around 3 years, I'd gained a bunch of weight and I was like starting to get miserable. How can I lose this weight? I wasn't willing to work out. I didn't want to I wanted the quick fix because it just seemed, I was 200 pounds at this time. And it just seemed like, how am I going to get out of this? And obesity ran in my biological dad's family. So I had this fear of becoming this 400 pound woman trapped. And so somebody I met showed me how to get phentermine online. And so I started ordering phentermine online and I lost 40 pounds and I was taking it as prescribed. I wasn't misusing it. So it was cunning, baffling, and powerful. That's how drugs are. That woke my addiction up. I had almost 5.5 years clean and I went to a high school reunion. I said to myself, if my husband doesn't come, I'm going to drink. And I drank and it was on.
What made you think that if he didn't, did you just have a feeling you were like having a tough time at that moment or
things were a little bit crazy? 4 boys, I was juggling I was a stay-home mom. My husband was gone a lot and I was misdiagnosed as bipolar. So I was on these meds and it was kind of getting crazy. I felt unmanageable. And so I said, if he doesn't come to this reunion, I'm going to drink, and I did. And then it was a shit show. I came home that night at 4:30 in the morning, very remorseful. My sponsor came over and then that went on for maybe 20 days. And then I went to the Res 12. I went to Residence 12 treatment program. It's an all women's program. And I got right back on.
Is that a local one in Washington?
Yep. It's in Kirkland.
Okay.
It's a really good treatment center. And so I got right back on the train and then I got almost another 5.5 years. I remember I started taking pills on the side. Like my best friend was taking pain pills. Okay. And so I was taking pain pills, sneaky. I wasn't drinking yet. And that went on for maybe a year. Like if I don't drink, I can get away with this.
Right.
And then I hung out with a friend that was in recovery that was drinking and hiding it. And she was like, if you wash your mouth out with soap, nobody can smell it. And I was like, okay. And so then I started to drink and washing my mouth out with soap.
If you're in recovery for narcotics, like we were talking about, you really can't have anything, right? You don't.
No.
You can't. You can't have any alcohol.
Alcohol is a drug.
I know that's. Yeah. But I've heard people say, "Oh no, I can have a drink."
People are confused about that all the time.
Okay.
But alcohol is a drug. Any mind altering, mood altering. Yeah, it is a drug.
Okay.
And so
you're walking around green light.
Yeah. And my husband was like, I said, go ahead. And I went behind a tree and chugged this little airplane bottle and he followed me and caught me. And he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, the hat was out of the bag. And then we went away with our friends that drank to this cabin out of town and he drank. I handed him a drink. He had 12 years clean.
Oh, wow.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you just wanted misery loves company?
Yep.
Yeah. And your friends are drinking.
Yep. I just wanted to get loaded. I don't know what it was, but I do feel horrible for doing that. But he could have said no. Like when I relapsed for that short time and went to Res 12, he kicked me out of the house. He said, you can't come here if you're loaded. He had those boundaries up. So I was able to get clean. And I'm not blaming my husband, but because I'm a grown woman and we needed help beyond alcohol and drugs. Being married it's not easy. There's a lot of shit that happens and communication and, when you have a bunch of kids, you get lost, and I felt lost. I just felt like a mom and who's Rachel and a wife and who's Rachel? Where is Rachel in this picture? We started getting loaded and he was just drinking. I wasn't doing meth yet. Then I started doing meth after maybe a year. I went to my friends in Mountain Lake Terrace that was a dealer, and I started doing meth secretly. Then he soon found out, and then he held on for like a year of me doing meth without doing meth. And then one night we were wasted fighting, and he was begging me for the pipe, and I gave him the pipe, and then we were off running. And so getting current to this, I was in a 6-year relapse and he was in a 4.5-5 year relapse at this time. It was total chaos. I was going to this dive bar in Lake City all the time, seeking attention, using meth, drinking, day drinking. I couldn't be awake and not have any substance in my body. I just couldn't. If I didn't have it, I was going into withdrawals immediately. Off the hook at this point, like not even functionable whatsoever. My boys were just hated me. They just were so disappointed in me. They just didn't trust me. They found meth pipes under my mattress. I was belligerent. I mean, it was just insanity.
And they're watching all of this.
They're in high school watching all of this. It was just so brutal. So in 2019, I hit a bottom. I was desperate. In my shower, listening to worship, crying out to God, like, please
help me.
Please help me. I had this big plan, like, babe, let's go to Florida and get couples treatment. And I set it all up. I had to wait till January to get on his insurance, and we could both go to Florida, both get treatment, and, stop this madness. My husband said, no, I'm not going to treatment. And so I was like,
this is in 2019.
Yeah. And I was devastated. Then I went on a major binger. Like, I was drinking a 1/2 gallon of vodka a day and smoking maybe 2 grams, 3 grams of meth a day. Like, I was just held up in my bedroom, smoking speed and drinking and crying out, listening to worship, crying out to God, and on the hotline. And I was telling the truth to the hotline guy. I was telling him I'm smoking meth right now. I just was like, I need help really bad. And I had blankets up on my curtains, and I was paranoid. My hair was falling out. I had, meth pipe burns on my body. It was all bad. I was like, if you're not going to go, I'm going to go. And so I called the hotline, and I was like, if you were to go to any treatment center, where would you go? Because I was all set on going to Florida.
Right.
But I had no idea what my plan was going to be from here. And he said, let me call you back in 5 minutes. And he said, I can get you on an airplane to Malibu Detox. What day can you come? And so this was Friday, and I said Sunday. And he goes, okay, I'm going to get you your tickets. We're going to get you here. And just hold on, girl. Just hold on. I went to the bar, said goodbye to all my, bar flies, and smoked meth up until the airport. And my husband's a good man. He's just in the grips of addiction too, and he got me on that airplane. And that was in 2019, and I gave it my all. And I had a breakthrough with a horse, and I had a breakthrough doing breathing therapy. For once in my life, I was not slipped through the cracks. I could not believe where God planted me. Like, it was a dream come true. And when I was a kid, it wasn't my dream is to go to the best treatment center that there is in the world, but, being in addiction, that was my dream. Like, I wanted to get healing. I wanted to go deep. I wanted to be free of the demons inside of me.
You wanted peace.
I wanted peace. When I had this horse therapy, this horse was looking at me like it was as if God was looking at me, and I had hope. Even in the midst of
all of that.
Yeah. This horse said to me, Rachel, I was there the whole time that was happening to you. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like with the men that, hurt me. And God was there the whole time. And I just broke down. Like I knew it because all these God shots that kept me alive and that I didn't die and I didn't give up.
Yeah.
And I just felt that in that moment. You were there the whole time. And then the second one was this umbilical cord. When I was doing breathing, I was violently breathing, just crying out, I just want to be whole. I just want to be free of all this. I just want this addiction. I just want to be free. And all of a sudden, this umbilical cord snapped and it was real for me. Like that addiction is done. I felt like I was delivered in that moment. Right. Not to say that you don't have to go to meetings and get a sponsor and do the step work and you got to stay present, and there's no graduation in recovery. You don't someday arrive and you're done. This is is my life, and I love recovery today. And today I do have freedom. I'm working the 12 steps. I have a sponsor. I go to at least 3 meetings a week. I play clean and sober softball, and I've incorporated a workout at Fit Therm. I do kickboxing. You know about that, Julie, and that's how I met you.
I know.
And I feel like this was,
she's kind of a badass too.
Yeah.
This tiny little lady, man. It's like, don't mess with her.
right. And I feel like, when I met you, it was like a divine appointment for me, like feel like we are badass women that do hard things, and we can, because we need each other,
That's
I
right.
mean, it's brutal out there, and life gets really lifey. And like I said, whether it's an eating disorder, or gambling, sex, or, self-harm, or, I mean, we all have our struggles, or, we think we look a certain way that we're delusional about, like,
Oh yeah.
like sometimes I think I'm fat, and I'm like, I hit my goal. Like, why would you think you're fat? You hit your goal that you made, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I have to check myself, and I have to have accountability with my women posse that tell me, no, Rachel, no, that's lies.
Sometimes we need that reassurance. We need to hear from other people because we already know. We already know that we're doing good. We already know that we're on the right path. But sometimes it's nice to get that validation from people that you care about, that care about you.
Yes.
I think the validation of all the work that's going into it is part of that.
Because
you do know how hard you're working. You know what you're doing. You're putting in and doing all the things. So then to have somebody else confirm that, like, okay, they see me. It's, yep, this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
On the outside, it's showing.
Yeah. It's hard sometimes. Recovery is hard sometimes. And today I don't think about getting loaded all the time, but there are those days where, I'm tired, or I don't want to go to a meeting, or that old stinking thinking starts to creep up, and thinking, well, maybe I can have a little drinky poo, or I haven't ever tried claw or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, like... And then I have to call and tell on myself, hey, I'm thinking about getting loaded. What is this about? Or I've stolen in recovery. I've gone to Goodwill and I put on a Lulu tank top and I walked out with it. And I have money, like what is this about, Rachel?
Yeah.
It was to get that feeling, to get that rush. And so when I did that, I called my sponsor and I was like, what am I doing? So we get to figure those things out. It's just really one day at a time. I don't ever have to get loaded again, one day at a time. And as long as I'm really digging into my truth and telling the truth, I'm good. But once I start lying, and once I get to be sneaky, or if I took that tank top and didn't tell anybody about it, I'm on my way to a relapse.
You would be taking something else. So the real call out there is that you recognize that your behavior is not taking you down the right path.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's all, the secrets.
Secrets, I'm only as sick as my secrets. So if I don't have any secrets, I'm not sick.
Okay.
So I really tell on myself all the time. I have 5 women that I trust with my whole heart, my whole life. That is huge for me.
Are they all women, just out of curiosity, that are also in recovery?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys all have the same goals and you support each other in that way.
Yes. And 3 of them I've known for decades.
Okay.
So, and it's beautiful. Like, we go on retreats, we do life together. My husband's still in active addiction. People would say that's dangerous. It is dangerous. And so that is a concern to me. But at the same time, I do stay in my own lane and I do talk about it. Before I would be like, no, my husband's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's good. No, I'm talking about it. Sometimes, some days it's more painful than others, and he has a job that's in Ocean Shores, so we have a lot of space, which I know God created that for me, because
you need to maintain your strength.
Yeah, the same God that pulled me out of the fire is going to pull him out of the fire.
Right.
If that moment doesn't come and I'm done, I'm just kind of in, just for today.
Yeah,
just for today.
I think that's how you have to. I don't know, but it seems to me like that's how you would have to look at things. If you try to think too far in advance, you're not in the present, like you were saying.
Right. Like,
and
future tripping.
Right. If you're in the present, then you're really thinking and kind of understanding how you're feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something earlier, just touched on it, about the highs and the lows. And was there ever a period of time where you felt like you wanted to not be here, to take your life or anything like that? The depression and
I never actively wanted to kill myself, but I was killing myself with drugs.
Differently, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was slowly killing myself with drugs, but I never actually wanted to take my life.
Do you think early on you just felt like I'm indestructible, invincible? I can stop whatever I want. I like how I feel.
I remember saying one time that I like doing drugs. I actually remember saying, I hope nobody does an intervention on me because I like doing drugs, and that's the delusional denial. But I always felt rotten and just ruined.
Like not worthy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel worthy of a good life. And so that's all over my step work is unworthiness. It's a thing that keeps coming up on my step work is when am I going to feel worthy? And today I can honestly say I do feel worthy of this life. I do feel worthy of being healthy. I am a good mom today. And I do come up from a place of love everywhere I go today. And I don't steal and I stay present. And, sometimes I want to say I don't lie, but sometimes I say things like I did 50 push-ups when I did 48. Or, just stupid shit.
Like normal people kind of like.
But, I'm really trying to check myself with that. Like, why do I have to? Because I always feel like I have to go bigger so I can be seen or heard because I was not seen or heard as a child. So I'm always like this little kid jumping up and down like, can you see me now? Can you see me now? And so sometimes I get a little bit off my truth or whatever, and I have to check myself.
So how do you, like for people that are listening that might be in active addiction right at the moment, what are some of the things that you can suggest maybe to help them find that peace? Obviously going to treatment and I would think acknowledging that you've got an issue, got a problem is the first step.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like keeping yourself in a place where you feel worthy, are there things that you do? I obviously know you work out, meditation.
I would say pray.
Okay.
Pray to whoever your God is, pray and call a hotline, NA, AA. There's a lot of resources and a lot of help out there. Malibu Detox is, what saved my life this time. And that's in California. And if you have good insurance, it's a beautiful program. Or you can just start going to meetings. And one day, the 2002 recovery that I got, I didn't go to treatment that time.
You didn't?
I just started going to meetings and getting a sponsor.
Did any of your family members that weren't in addiction go to programs to help them? You hear how
my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. She sounds like an amazing woman.
She is.
Yeah.
She's awesome. But no, not anybody else. I'd like my boys to go to Al-Anon or Al-Anon. I hear a lot of good things about Al-Anon.
That's just helping to understand and support probably the person that is in the throes of addiction or learning how to put up boundaries, I would think.
Yeah. Because when I was in this relapse, my mom was clean and she was watching her daughter and she was living with us. So she was watching her daughter just deteriorate and it was rough. And so she could have benefited from Al-Anon, we all could benefit from Al-Anon.
Yeah.
Just having a family, whether they're normies or not. I don't think anybody's a normie. We all have our shit, right?
Yeah. So when you talk about the feelings, so this is something that I think about when it comes to addiction and somebody that's gotten clean and then they fall, just like you told in your story. I know getting out of addiction is quite a physical thing,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So that's what it's in my mind. I'm like, that sounds so awful what you go through, the withdrawals and all of that. In my normie mind, I'm thinking, what would be the desire to like start again, knowing that you might have to go through that again.
To be a slave.
Yeah.
To drugs.
Yeah.
Maybe because
you're
they
not
know.
thinking about that part. You're
I
thinking about the euphoric. And there's something in your brain when you're an addict that you don't think about the consequences. Like you're just thinking about that feeling of just wanting to change the way you feel. Most addicts have so much trauma and so much that they're self-medicating over that it's just, there's something in your brain that just misses that part. You just miss that part of, oh my God, if I do drugs, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to blow up my whole life, my family. I'm going to lose all the trust. And, you're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because
you've gotten through it before. So you're like, I would think you'd probably be going, well, I can get through it again if I need to, maybe.
That's what I did. I thought, okay, I'll just do it this one time. Like one of my relapses, I thought, when I went to the high school reunion, I said, I'm just going to do this tonight and I'll get right back on the train. And it was harder. It's harder than you think. Or this last relapse, it lasted 6 years. And I had no idea I was going to be if I don't know if I have another relapse in me. that's like playing Russian roulette. We don't think that I have to take care of my recovery. That has to be number one.
Does it feel like you've had to transfer your attention to something else? I know people that have kind of addictive personalities.
Yes.
And so maybe it wasn't drugs or whatever, but they start with one thing, but then they move on to something else and they become obsessed kind of with that.
Well, I kind of like working out now.
Become obsessive though about the recovery in some ways.
I kind of am.
Yeah. Which I would imagine.
That's my life.
Yeah.
Clean and sober softball. I mean, my whole life is recovery.
Yeah.
Well, and surrounding yourself with people that are in the same mindset.
Yeah.
Makes it probably a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but it makes it more tolerable when you're having a tough time.
Well, I don't hang out with people that drink or do drugs. You know, I just don't, other than my husband. That sounds kind of crazy, but I don't talk to him about it usually, and I don't look for it, and I don't look through his phone. You know, I don't do those things anymore because that's only hurting myself.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, okay, God, you know, this is your battle, and I'm just going to take care of myself. Just stay clean no matter what. I'm in the no matter what club.
Yeah. Biggest thing that I'm hearing is that really is amazing to me is that you're finally taking care of yourself.
Yes.
That goes back to that whole I'm worthy.
That's
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yes.
taking care of yourself, knowing your worth,
Yes.
and being able to be in that place because of that work, that you're able to be available and present for your family and the people around you that love you.
It's beautiful.
And most importantly for yourself, because
It's beautiful.
you can't be there for everybody else if you're not there for yourself first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really blessed. Some of my friends, I mean, it's this little joke like, who are you? Like, you know, I really amaze myself sometimes, or I think, oh my gosh, who is this? I do things that are just I've never done before, you know, and I'm growing up, you know, I'm finally growing up, and I feel confident. Like I do have a job, and I'm starting a business. It's called Flair, and I'm doing flowers and hair, and I'm in menopause, and things are weird that way. But
We have no idea what you're talking about.
I know you do.
Wait. I have to go back to flowers and hair.
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
Flair.
That's
What a great name.
right.
such a good,
Yeah. So I got my business license. I've done a few weddings already, and I do hair on the side. I have a few clients a month. I'm just kind of taking it a little bit slow, you know, and I'm for some reason holding on to the Safeway job just a little bit longer, just because it was first job out of treatment, and I've kept it for 4.5 years. I'm always on time, and I feel like, you know, it was introduced me into life.
like to say, consistency.
Because I was
something.
manager,
Yeah.
you know, I was hired into the manager position. So I learned all this stuff. I learned a lot. Flowers is a gift from God. I was born to be a florist. I really was. I don't know if I was born to be a hairdresser, but my dad was a barber. So I feel like it's in my blood. And I like doing hair. I like doing certain things. If somebody came in with super long hair and came in and said they wanted a pixie, I'd be like, girl, you go somewhere else. I can give you her
I
number.
am not going to be that person.
Right? But a good color, or, you know, and I love to do blowout, and I love to make people look pretty, and I love
And feel good.
flowers comes natural.
Yeah.
Like I
love
know how to
that.
do that.
Flair.
We've kind of found your passion. I love the name.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
Exciting.
So I'm like, okay, God, you gave me this job not to take it away. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's where I have to stay present, and I am worthy of this
Yes.
job. Like, I'm not going to blow it up. I'm fully equipped to do it.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And now we know she does flair.
Yeah.
Flowers and hair,
girl,
yeah.
I can do your roots.
Well, Rachel, I gotta say, thank you so much for sharing. That's some big stuff that you
Yeah.
put out today
you.
and shared with us.
you.
I know you said you haven't really talked like that and told your story. Thank you so much for doing it with us.
The whole time I've been
Yeah.
listening in awe because I know you in recovery.
Right.
I don't know you the other way. I only know you this way.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're talking and so raw. I just appreciate your just being so raw and honest about the things that have happened in your life and what's kind of gotten you to the place that you're at today. I'm really proud of you. That's
Thank
a
you.
lot of work,
Thank
man.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is
Yeah.
a lot of work.
Well, it's been an honor to be here.
Maybe we can put some resources that maybe you have. We can put it on some of our social pages
That would be awesome.
for people to have access to.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, badass woman, you know,
Yeah. We can do hard things.
we
Yeah.
can do
We
hard
can do
things.
hard things. Yes, we can.
Well, on that note, we are going to sign off. So thank you so much again for being here. And Michelle is going to give a plug for our socials, I imagine.
Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, blondebrunetteandamike@gmail.com if you want to email us with any episode suggestions or
any questions.
If you need to reach out any questions or if you want more information about Flair, flowers and hair for weddings.
If anybody out there is struggling or if you are just feeling hopeless or need help, there always is hope. As long as you're breathing, there is always hope. Don't give up. Don't ever, ever give up. And I love you. You are needed, wanted, and loved.
And worthy.
Worthy, baby.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye, you guys.
Bye.